On a summer morning, a middle-aged Tamilian entered and sat for about half an hour. His restlessness and rolling eyes suggested that he had something weighty on his mind. At last he spoke with an assumed humility, particularly as he chose to speak in English. Swami, we ignorant people read so much, hoping to have an inkling of truth. But alas, the more we read, the more truth recedes from our ken. I have read all the Western philosophers, from Descartes to Bertrand Russell. They are all useless. But our rishis differ among themselves. Shankara says, go on repeating, I am Brahman, Eham Brahmasmi, and you will become Brahman. Madhvacharya says that the soul is ever separated from Brahman. But you, Bhagavan, say, inquire, who am I, and you will arrive. Many other teachers gave many other solutions. Is this not puzzling? Which of you is right? Having waited for an answer in vain for 5 minutes, the man resumed with a mildly raised tone, Swami, which way am I to go? Bhagavan, with a gentle wave of the hand, said, go the way you came. A few spick-and-span Europeans entered the hall one morning, slightly bowed to Bhagavan, and sat in the front row. Their leader was immediately recognized as a veteran missionary, famous for his fiery preachings in YMCAs, Christian colleges, and public halls of towns and cities in India. One of the others was his private secretary. The preacher began with a question to set the ball rolling towards his pet theme. After some answers, Bhagavan eventually referred him to the self as the ultimate reality, without knowing the identity and motive of the questioner. That was excuse enough for the questioner to fire a stream of quotations from the Christian scripture with his own interpretations on them. Fortunately, before he went very far, Major Chadwick, who at the time usually meditated there, shouted a challenge from the other end of the hall in a powerful stentorian voice, which took the man completely by surprise and eventually made him think it wise to keep silent and soon afterwards leave the hall with his party. In April of 1943, a young man in his teens with blushing cheeks and a very soft voice asked, Swami, can I see God in this life? Bhagavan, gently smiling, said, first, tell me who is the I in your question, who, what, and where God is, and what do you mean by life? The youth dropped his eyes and remained silent. An elderly man from the back rushed forward, produced a pencil, wrote a question on a piece of paper, and handed it to the Maharshi. Bhagavan read it and smiled broadly. It was a question on time and space. And Bhagavan said, may I know who is putting this question? Space, yourself, or time? Of course, I. Do you know that I? After a little hesitation, leave the I question to the philosophers and answer my question. Someone else said, what? Is time or space dearer to you than your own self? And Bhagavan said, all these questions are superfluous. One thing you must bear in mind is that no question can be solved without self-knowledge. On the realization of the self, everything becomes clear and all problems are solved. A fortnight later, a science student strolled in, and the student said, "Science tells us that the atom is made of a nucleus in the center, with electrons moving around it in the intervening space. Is the relation between God and the perfect man the same as these or different? I mean, although God and the Jnani are one unit, yet they preserve their separate identities." And Bhagavan said, "Who is the perfect man? He who has perfected himself by sadhana. So you think yourself imperfect that you ask this question. Will it not then be better for you to perform sadhana and perfect yourself, and then you will know what happens? Why bother now about a state which comes only after perfection? The fact is that you are even now perfect, and your supposed imperfection is only your own creation." There was another time I remember from 2nd of April 1937 about a skeptic. A very busy Polish journalist came for a few hours this afternoon, within which time he expected to be shown the truth in the clearest possible manner. He said, "I have read in your books that one should inquire into the nature of one's I in order to know the truth, which you call the self. From biological science, I have my own answer to the question of my own identity. What I wish to know is, who are you? You who speak of and seem to have experienced the self. If another man confirms your statement, and so will a million, then there is the probability of the self. Have you no self yourself? Are you then in the region of probabilities, even with regard to your own self?" Yes, one cannot be sure of anything. Even God cannot be proved with absolute certainty. Leave God alone for the present. What of yourself? I want confirmation of the self. You seek confirmation of yourself from others. How do you know that others exist? By my senses. My implies the I, which owns the senses. You take your existence for granted, at the same time ask others to prove it to you. Similarly, you admit the certainty of your senses, which see others, whilst denying all certainty. You see how you contradict yourself? The fact is that there are no others. There is no such a person as you. Each man, although addressed as you, styles himself as I. Even the confirmation you demand from others comes only from the I. You and they occur only to the I, without which they are meaningless. If you are right, what becomes of progress and science? Progress and science are meant only for the perceiving mind. For whom is the progress if the mind is absent, such as in deep sleep or during a nap? The goal of all progress and science, you admit, is truth, which is the pure intelligence, the substratum consciousness, from which the thinking mind sprouts, and into which it is ultimately dissolved when what you call perfection, to which science aspires to lead, is attained. This is what we call realization of the self. That is, realization of the source of the mind.